Hi everyone, welcome. We're in my wormery. I got a couple worm bins that need feeding. What they're getting today is a mixture of fruits and veggies. I see some banana peels in here, some lettuce. I've also got some coffee and some leaves off here on the side that we can use as bedding. Just dry leaves. So let's get one of these bins up onto the bench and get to work. Of the two bins we're feeding today, this is the younger of the two. Last time I was in here checking on it, I did sort of acknowledge the fact that feeding this go-around might not even be necessary, but then I kind of took pity on the bin and I said, you know what, as long as I'm going to be coming down here and feeding anyway, I might as well just give it a little bit, even if it's not much. Just put something extra in here, mainly because the food that I added most recently, just a few days ago, was actually some really slow composting types of food. So if you look under the paper here, we're using to cover up where we feed, just feeding right down the middle here. We'll just cover up again with that paper afterwards. You can see how much they like being in that paper. Just come up to cruise around and hang out inside of it because it's all damp. I guess they can nibble on that as well. But these things right here, right? The pits from a mango, a couple of those. There's the stem of a pumpkin. Things that'll sustain this bin for a while from a food perspective, but kind of slow composting stuff, you know, and I'd like to just supplement that with a handful or two of more quickly composting stuff. The bin's starting to fill up pretty nicely. You know, we'll just push things over to here and pile it up a little bit, but we'll also take a peek into it as long as we're here. It's a real treat looking at the way the material looks nowadays in my bins. It never used to look this way. It's only ever since I started covering up with the plastic that everything has this really nice damp consistency to it. Nice and cool and damp everywhere. And populated with worms everywhere too. Kind of like elevating the overall depth of the material inside this bin. Trying to open a little bit of a chasm in the middle where we can place. Let's take a look in here too. Yeah, same story everywhere. Such nice consistent material. Still a lot of leaf material scattered in between all the castings too. But it is very, very rich in castings, as you can see, because there's worms just cruising through it all over the place. I've been trying to decide whether I would want to consider this as having as many worms in it as the other two red wiggler bins that I've got going. Those two, when I built them, I definitely acknowledged right there when we were setting them up with the worms that, man, these are, you know, really heavily populated bins. But somehow with this last, newest of my bins, I didn't really have that feeling. But more recently, it seems like the worm population in here is quite dense. So maybe those other bins really don't have much on this one. Maybe this one is just as heavily populated as those two. It's definitely making its way through the food nicely, creating nice castings throughout. Well, let's get that stem back down in there, but like these pits and everything, they're all on the side now. We've kind of raised things up. Before we put our food in, why don't we drop in a little bit of leafy matter, sort of a supplement to the bedding that's in there already. I'm thinking, I had thought that maybe if, you know, my typical feeding is 2 handfuls, I placed 3 handfuls into this container here. So I figured 1 handful for this bin and then 2 handfuls for the other bin. Mainly because of those other objects that are already in here, and also because I believe that the other one probably has a slightly higher worm population in it. Also got this coffee. Ooh, that's fine, I got plenty to spare. Just want to leave a little for the other bin. And let's see how it looks if we just place this paper right on top. Little leaf bedding on the bottom, a little bit of paper bedding on top. It's going to be like a heaven on earth for these worms. How spoiled they are. But really, it seems like almost like the perfect space for worms in here with this moisture. I'm not sure how it shows on the camera, but I could tell it's just night and day compared to what I'm accustomed to. And it's all loose. It's not all stuck together like mud. It's all, you know, I would say that no matter where you pull some out from, as long as you're not covered in worms, you got stuff that more or less just crumbles. Maybe, it's tacking to itself a little bit because it is a little bit more damp than what you would want to try running through a screen, but it wouldn't take much, I believe, for this stuff to air out a little bit and be able to be screened. But the first thing that would have to happen is the worms would have to get moved out. Then we can start talking about harvesting the material, screening it, and stuff like that. So I think we've got ourselves a real winner here. We'll see how long those slow composting items take to finish. Before I put the plastic on, I feel like I'd like to have a little bit of paper cover, and this is just a couple sheets of paper that came out of one of my other recently retired bins. I know this stuff ain't gonna last for long because it's already quite tattered, but it's just more stuff for the worms to take advantage of, and it's just taking up space here on my bench. And I did actually set it aside in the hopes that I could use it in a fashion similar to this. So, good deal. It'll be compost soon anyway. I usually do that in the interest of trying to keep my plastic a little bit cleaner. But once they get covered in castings like this already, it's just like irrelevant at that point. It's already covered in castings, so it doesn't matter. A little bit messy sometimes with these pieces of plastic touching the castings. Some of it getting stuck to it, some of it flying all over the table. Luckily, when it dries, it cleans up pretty easily. All right, let's get the other bin out here. The slightly older and slightly more heavily populated red wiggler bin. This bin I've got to always remind myself to be careful when I'm handling it so I don't grab that handle and have it break in my hands, and it'll be a real messy day with compost everywhere. Peeling back, let's see how this looks. No there either. All right, good enough. Here we've got a very similar setup, same types of worms, about the same volume and quantity of material, but I believe that this bin has significantly more worms in it. And it's always really interesting to see how much the top changes from one check-in to the next. It's all fresh castings across the top, right where the plastic was. They just love being under the plastic where the moisture condenses and drops down. Now this coffee filter's been in here for, I believe, maybe a third week now. I was curious to see how long one of these is going to last before it shreds to pieces. Well, it's still a single piece. It's holding up good. Just like to mark where we've fed, so I usually use the coffee filters. That last bin we had all that paper, we just use that as the marker to show where we last fed. Typically I'll feed down the middle, and that's where the last feeding was, but it was over a week ago. So I guess we'll see how they're doing on what they were allotted last time. I guess what they're getting now is going to amount to about maybe 1.5 handfuls, maybe 2 handfuls. Once again, I'm just going to open up a little bit more space so that we've got room to add even a little bedding before we add the food. Let's just get a little bit more of this castings material out of the way. It's not even really casting material, it's just worms. Many worms. Like I said, this is a really heavily populated container. When you pick through this stuff, it's a little bit older too than the other bin that we looked at, by at least a month, I would say. So in here you definitely see much fewer of the these little stems, the leaf stems, that to me are usually a pretty good indicator that a worm bin is still kind of fresh, or that the leaves were recently added, because they do take a little bit of time. But I definitely see far fewer of them in here than I do in my other bins. Now I'm starting to see some banana peel, I believe, maybe. A couple other, maybe just a piece of cardboard, I believe, bedding. Little tiny fragments of food. Parts of what I believe was the last feeding. Here we've got something a little bit more substantial. it's tough. It's like wood. It's because it's the back stem of where multiple bananas would hang off of. Even just one of the stems of one of the bananas still here. It's pretty soft though. It's getting mushy. But that's almost like tough like wood. But since it is made up of fibers that the worms and everything can crawl in between, they get in there and they soften it up, gobble it up from the inside out. All right, then we got ourselves a nice little bit of space down here. Bin is really coming along quick. Makes me wonder if this bin might be ready to get geared up for harvesting soon too. It definitely burns through whatever food it's given quickly. Whatever's left in here is theirs, so let's just drop it right in. You know, it might have looked like a lot because it was all big leaves. I don't think we really gave much more than we gave to the other bin. So this bin is going to get hungry quick. I'm not going to bother with it now. I think they'll be good for a few days. I've still got the leftovers from previous feedings too. But if we were to decide that it was time to get things in this bin driving towards harvest, then I think we would ultimately end up starving the bin anyway. So who knows, this might just be its last feeding. Next time we come in here, we might decide, hey, it's time to let the worms really break down everything that remains in the bin, and then start gearing them up for migration to get them out of there and harvest the castings. It's crazy. I've never seen bins turn around so quick this way with this many worms. But that's the thing, is when you got bins that are a little bit overpopulated, they burn through the food really quickly. So I could see this getting harvested, and again, I think the harvesting would be driven by the fact that we're pretty much out of space, you know? I mean, we're overflowing practically. And that's kind of my telltale that it's time to steer towards harvest. If I wanted to allocate a larger bin to place these guys into to continue, then that would be fine, but the material does seem like it's so close to being ready, it might as well be harvested and then just get the worms out of here as a whole, get them working on a fresh batch somewhere, because this stuff does seem like it could be harvested soon. It's definitely getting to the finish line quickly. So we'll think about maybe making that the last feeding. Start steering this one towards harvest as well. Alright, so that's my red wigglers. The ones that needed to be fed are now fed, so we're all good to go. I've still got a little bit of cleanup here, but I won't keep around for that. That's boring. I'll put things away and get things cleaned up after the camera goes off. But before I shut the camera off, let me just really say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone's input and comments. It's great that you keep tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a thumbs up. It's really appreciated. Also consider becoming a subscriber to the channel too. Alright, have a great day everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Bye now.